The first time she caught me staring, I was certain my quiet little life had just fallen apart. My coffee slipped from my hand, my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the birds, and every embarrassing mistake I had ever made seemed to crash into that single moment. She lowered her sunglasses, smiled with amused kindness instead of anger, and asked a simple question that changed everything. "Can you help me with my back?" I had no idea that such an ordinary request would become the beginning of a story about healing, loneliness, forgiveness, and the incredible power of simple human kindness. Before we continue this emotional journey, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness so you never miss another heartwarming story that reminds us how small acts of compassion can change lives forever. I had lived in my small suburban neighborhood for nearly 4 years without making more than polite conversation with anyone. After losing both my parents within 18 months and watching a long relationship quietly fall apart, I had convinced myself that keeping to myself was safer than risking another heartbreak. My routine rarely changed. Every morning I watered the flowers my mother once loved, worked remotely from my dining room, and ended the day sitting quietly on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors I could never describe well enough. Life wasn't terrible, but it felt empty, like a beautiful house with no laughter inside. Everything changed when the little cottage next door finally found a new owner. Moving trucks arrived one warm Saturday morning, followed by a cheerful golden retriever who seemed determined to greet every person on the street. Then I saw her. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wore old jeans, carried heavy boxes without complaint, and smiled at everyone who waved. There was something refreshingly genuine about her. She looked like someone who had learned to smile even after life had given her reasons not to. Over the next few weeks, our lives quietly overlapped. She always greeted me with a warm wave whenever we happened to be outside at the same time. Sometimes her dog wandered into my garden, and instead of feeling annoyed, I found myself laughing as we gently guided him home together. I learned her name was Emma from another neighbor, but beyond that, she remained a mystery. She worked from home, spent evenings reading on her patio, and seemed happiest surrounded by flowers, birds, and sunshine. One particularly warm afternoon, I was trimming my rose bushes when I noticed Emma sunbathing in her backyard. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. My eyes simply drifted toward the laughter of her playful dog chasing butterflies. Then she turned, caught me looking in her direction, and instead of appearing offended, she smiled. My face immediately burned with embarrassment. Before I could disappear into my house forever, she called out with surprising confidence and asked if I could help apply sunscreen to the spot on her upper back she couldn't quite reach herself. For a second, time seemed to stop. My mind raced with every possible reason to refuse, mostly because I was terrified of making the situation awkward. But there was something so natural and trusting about the way she asked that I couldn't bring myself to say no. I carefully helped her, keeping the conversation light and respectful. We laughed about my obvious nervousness, and by the time I walked back home, I realized something extraordinary had happened. For the first time in years, I had enjoyed talking to another person without feeling the weight of my past pressing down on every word. That simple interaction opened the door to countless small moments. We started sharing morning coffee on weekends. Sometimes we exchanged gardening tips. Other evenings we walked our neighborhood while her energetic dog happily pulled us toward every squirrel in sight. Our conversations slowly moved beyond weather and flowers. We talked about our childhood dreams, favorite books, embarrassing mistakes, and the strange ways grief changes people. There was never any pressure to impress one another. We simply listened. One evening, after watching the sunset together, Emma quietly admitted that she hadn't moved to our neighborhood for a fresh career opportunity as everyone believed. She had come after surviving a difficult marriage that had left her questioning her own worth. Years of emotional manipulation had convinced her she wasn't enough, until finally she gathered the courage to leave everything behind and start over. She wasn't looking for romance. She was simply trying to remember who she had been before someone else decided her value. Her honesty encouraged me to tell my own story. I confessed how losing my parents had broken something inside me that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I admitted that I had spent years avoiding friendships because saying goodbye had become too painful. Every relationship felt temporary, so I chose loneliness before loneliness could choose me again. Instead of offering empty advice, Emma simply listened. Sometimes the greatest kindness isn't finding the perfect words. It's sitting beside someone long enough for silence to become safe. As summer slowly faded into autumn, our friendship became something the entire neighborhood quietly admired. Elderly neighbors invited us to community barbecues. Children knocked on our doors asking if we would help organize the annual fall festival. The isolated man who once barely waved to anyone was suddenly helping decorate streets, carrying tables, planting flowers, and laughing with people whose names he had never bothered to learn before. Emma often reminded me that kindness spreads quietly, almost like sunlight moving across a room. It never forces itself. It simply arrives. Then life tested us again. One rainy evening Emma's dog suddenly collapsed during our walk. We rushed him to an emergency veterinary clinic where we learned he needed urgent surgery. The treatment would cost far more than Emma could comfortably afford. I watched her sit in the waiting room trying not to cry as she prepared herself for impossible decisions. Without thinking twice, I offered my savings. She refused immediately, insisting she couldn't accept something so generous. I reminded her that years earlier I had believed I had nothing left worth giving. She had already proven me wrong simply by being my friend. The surgery was successful. Watching that cheerful dog wag his tail again felt like witnessing hope itself return. Emma promised she would repay every dollar, but I honestly didn't care. Some debts are measured in money. Others are measured in the moments people help bring you back to life. She had already repaid me many times over without ever realizing it. Winter arrived with quiet snowfalls and warm evenings spent baking cookies for neighbors who couldn't leave their homes. Together we discovered that healing rarely happens in dramatic moments. It grows through ordinary days filled with patience, laughter, shared meals, and people choosing to stay even when life becomes difficult. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world compassion still exists. Before this story comes to an end, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell us about a simple act of kindness that completely changed your life or restored your faith in people. Your story might inspire someone reading the comments today. Looking back now, people sometimes ask me when I first fell in love with Emma. They assume it happened during some unforgettable romantic moment beneath fireworks or candlelight. The truth is much simpler. Love didn't arrive all at once. It quietly grew every time we chose kindness over fear, honesty over pride, and hope over loneliness. It began with an embarrassing glance across a backyard, continued with a simple request for help, and slowly became the foundation of a life neither of us believed we deserved after everything we had endured. Sometimes destiny doesn't announce itself with grand speeches or impossible miracles. Sometimes it appears as an ordinary neighbor smiling over a backyard fence on a sunny afternoon. Sometimes healing begins with a request as small as helping someone reach the middle of their back. And sometimes the greatest second chance isn't finding the perfect person. It's becoming the person you were always capable of being because someone believed you were worth knowing. As I sit on that same porch today, watching another sunset beside the woman who transformed my lonely world into a home filled with laughter, gratitude, and quiet joy, I realize the greatest gift life ever gave me wasn't being noticed while I was staring. It was discovering that kindness has a remarkable way of finding us exactly when we need it most, and when we choose to pass that kindness forward, we become someone else's second chance too.